very loving, very warm relationship between the two.
And Napoleon Hill, who you mentioned earlier, refers to the beginning of AA and the 12 steps in a way of spiritually tuning. So the whole Think and Grow Rich thing isn't really about money, if you really look at it. It's really about...
It's really about spirit, yeah. Somebody asked about Napoleon Hill. His major book is Think and Grow Rich. And it's powerful.
Yeah.
It's very powerful stuff. And it's open enough that you can approach it from a unity perspective and still get a great deal out of it. Anything? Yes, Bob?
A year or two ago, we came up with a word, trans-denominational, and we actually, put it into our About Us literature, and that's what really drew me to Unity, was the fact that they would pull from any religion anything that was pertinent and seemed viable and true. And can you speak to that, how it draws from so many other religions?
I would lovingly disagree with a little bit of that, because Unity doesn't pull from other religions. Unity is open to other religions. We have our own principles. We don't borrow principles from other churches and use them for ourselves. But yes, of course, Unity is always open. Two of my classmates in ministerial school were practicing Jews. And they had no trouble relating and coexisting with the two. Still don't. Yeah.
I was going to say, interesting, I grew up in the Jewish faith, and what drew me here and how I describe it when I'm describing unity to people of the Jewish faith is a spiritual community, not a church, because that word is so loaded, but as a spiritual community, but that is all grounded in your connection to God. I mean, that's really how I've been.
That's excellent. I think that's excellent. I think the movement is basically grounded not in Charles' work, but in Myrtle's. The Society of Silent Hope, which became Silent Unity, which has been answering correspondence and phone calls and now email for over a century. Over a century, non-stop, 24/7. It's just an amazing, so that Unity's basis is not so much how do I improve myself, but how can I be of use? How can I be of service? So that's where the idea of, I think, community comes from, and it's a good one. Yeah.
This is not a question, but more a comment. I am amazed at the synchronicity of Unity. For me, I first saw Unity, the booklet Daily Word, in my grandmother's house.
Oh. That's what I was about to say.
4, 5, 6 years old, and she was from Missouri. And to think of the connection there, that's when I first saw that booklet there. And I was not here last week because I was in Dayton, Ohio for the funeral of my uncle, the last living, well now in spirit, of 11. He was 95 years old, and he was a Unity student.
God bless him. God bless him. Yes, Daily Word has been published for about 75 years, and it has reached out to more people than almost anything else we could do. We would get phone calls, and I had the privilege of working at the phones in Silent Unity when I was in ministerial school. And we would get calls from people who knew nothing about Unity except the Daily Word. They saw the phone number in the Daily Word, and they called it. Yeah.
To add on to that, my mom's people was about American Baptists. One day I was at a gathering, and this woman asked me what church I go to. I said I go to Unity. And there were two women there, and she said, "Unity, what's that?" The second woman said, "Unity, you know Unity, Deadly Wood." Oh! Because a lot of, like Evelyn said, a lot of the older people They developed
Oh,
Baptists,
they live by
but
it.
they subscribe to the daily word.
It's, I was working yesterday on some of my new work for the, whatever, September, August, October issue, I think. And I always put myself and find myself in a meditative place because that's very sacred work. You know, those words are being read by women like that, and you know, you want to be supportive, and you want to hold true to our principles too, which can be really, really challenging. Is that your hand up? No. Okay. Alicia.
I wanted to echo what Bob said. I wasn't raised in any religious upbringing whatsoever. My mother is a recovering Catholic to this day, and my dad is huge humanitarian, and for that reason is an atheist, because he perceived religion to be very oppressive and his father didn't want kids to have anything to do with that. So I wasn't raised in that, but I came to Unity in my hometown, Albany, New York, and I loved it because in my perception, a lot of people were coming to Unity who had experienced different kinds of religious trauma, and there were so many mixed faiths. There was an entire Muslim family who attended my Unity church, and the father was a professor in Iraq, and then he came over here and was doing nonsense jobs here. And he said, I find most places of faith to be too strict, even mosques and churches, and this place isn't. And so he and I would connect a lot, and my pastor at Unity would quote Hindu texts and Buddhist texts. So from my perspective, there was maybe not a pulling in of, but an acceptance and an openness to, an acceptance of, and presenting that to people so that everyone from every walk of life could hear something and try to connect with something. And that was so valuable for me because a lot of people, our pastor, he didn't use words like Jesus and Christ, and he spoke about it once because he knew it was triggering for some people. So he didn't use specific words.
Ministers have the freedom to be who they are as long as they hold to these principles. I mean, it's not a coincidence that my most powerful religious experiences have been at Delphi and in India when I was traveling through studying Hindu expressions. It was unbelievably powerful. And spending time with the Dalai Lama. I mean, this is all part of it. It's all part of it, part of truth. I came back and was talking to somebody and mentioned I'd been to India, and she said, "Oh, what were you there for?" I said, "I met with the Dalai Lama," and she said, "Oh, he's going to hell." Somebody who believes that saintly man is going to hell. It's not somebody I can talk to. Yeah.
So just to get it straight, so Myrtle is Charles' daughter?
Wife.
Wife, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, does Unity, believe, what belief do they have about Jesus? Do they believe he took away people's sins, or do they believe he's God, or the Son of God, or?
Well, as we were just talking about the minister from Albany and me, there are a variety of understandings. But he is recognized as a great spiritual leader and as our spiritual leader. Unity has chosen, I mean, it could have chosen to follow the Quran or something else, but it chose to follow the Judeo-Christian tradition to use the Bible as a basic text because it's so effective and it's so powerful and it works, you know. So who Jesus Christ is depends on who you ask.
Who you ask, so it doesn't have a specific. Yeah, because I've found it, because my own background is Jewish, and so I found it, I don't feel like there's a real conflict, because I just like the fact that, I don't mind if it's used to some extent, but it's not used in a way that feels exclusive, like anyone can come and learn from.
Well, Jesus' background was Jewish too, so why don't you?
Yeah, that's true. There is that too, yes.
Okay, we're going to stop this, or we're going to hear all day. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing about religious science, because I did have experience there. That one big different characteristic of religious science is the way that they pray. And they have courses and people are taught to be practitioners. So unlike Unity's silent prayer service, in religious science you sit with a practitioner and they have a particular form of prayer. And when you're studying in there, you learn how to pray in that form. And they call it affirmative prayer.
Yeah.
And it's very structured, it's highly structured. I did a television show, ongoing television show in Oregon with it, and I co-hosted it with a religious science minister. And it was interesting, so much of the time we totally agreed on what we were talking about or who we were interviewing, but there would come those times, you know, when religious science is just a little bit more rigid. Yeah. Well, I hope this has been interesting.
Very
I'll-
interesting.
I-
Great, thank
You're very welcome. I could talk about this until tomorrow.
you. We could listen to until tomorrow, that's great.